Hey, welcome to Beyond the Quo. I'm Stacey Luces. So today I want to do something a little bit different. I know we've been kind of on some heavier topics this past couple of weeks, but I went to a networking event the other day and I felt agonized by the level of small talk. And we've all been there, right? We are standing at a networking event, drink in hand, coffee, if you will, stuck in that dreaded loop. So what do? Where are you from? How's the weather? Small talk isn't bad, right? But it rarely leads to a connection. And here's the truth. We're standing there. It can either be at a boardroom, a dinner party, at the dinner table. I know recently I've been having a tough time with my teens and finding out what to talk to them. But the conversations that really matter aren't the ones that are built on small talk. They're the ones that we have to push through our own discomfort sometimes and go beyond the surface. It's the ones that make other people feel seen, heard, understood. And quite frankly, we want that for ourselves. And I think that's where real influence and trust is built for those of us that not only are in leadership positions, but are leveling up overall in life and sort of the quality of what we do. So again, I'm Stacey. I'm an executive coach and a business strategist. For over 25 years, I've worked with Fortune 100 executives, founders, leaders across the world now. Because of my membership community. And we talk about a few things. We talk about redefining success on your own terms. We talk about living authentically. And we talk about leading courageously. And a lot of times leading courageously doesn't necessarily only mean leading yourself or your job, but leading in your community, leading in your household, sort of that ripple effect that cascades out, right? So I really love that. And so I'm here to tell you this, right? There are always going to be people that just want to have empty conversations. But for those of you, for those leaders that want to kind of rise, you've got to make every conversation count. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time today just talking about, how to have conversations that actually matter. So a lot of us default to small talk because it's safe. Jobs, weather, sports, complimenting. I like to compliment people genuinely, but traffic, right? These are topics that are low risk. They fill the silence and they don't demand much from us. But here's the problem. They feel transactional. Not only do they feel transactional, but they don't root and build relationships. And I want to say also at the dinner table, there have probably been times you've asked your family, how was your day? And then the answer, I know my answer sometimes is just fine. And that's it. There's no room for expansion. There's no room for better sort of connection. And to me, dinner time, we try to do dinner as a family a couple times a week. It's been hard because everybody's kind of on their own beat a little bit. But definitely that is a way to give us what we crave, which is real connection, real authenticity, and to kind of feel like we're not running parallel lives, but we are still embedded and understand what's happening with each other. I want to give you a little story. So I was working with this client. Let's call her Maria. She's a senior director, brilliant at her job, often going to high-level events that sort of scale across the agency. But the thing is, she felt invisible in meetings. She'd show up, contribute in the best way that she felt possible, but she'd leave with no one really remembering who she was or having any true notion of what she brought to the table beyond sort of that professional thing. When we unpacked it, we realized that to her, she was really trying what a lot of us try to do, which is keeping our professional lives separate from our personal lives and not wanting to sort of blur the lines between the two of those. What did that lead to? So the consequence of that was she was polite, but forgettable, right? And so one day we issued a challenge to her, we meaning me and her to her. And instead of just saying, how was your weekend, which was the regular Monday opening when she had her check-in with her CFO, she said, what's one thing you're excited about right now, inside or outside of work? And he kind of leaned back and really had to think about it, but it had captured his attention. And so he smiled and he ended up sharing a really deeply personal response about a nonprofit that he had recently volunteered for and he was super passionate about, which led to her knowing someone that could actually help them with a problem that they had at this nonprofit. So that little 5-minute exchange not only created sort of a new depth to their relationship, a new level of connection, but she was able to provide value to something that he was super passionate about that was not transactional and only having to do with work. So I love the fact that she took on that challenge. And my hope is that some of you that really struggle, and I will be honest, I am, and I've talked about this a lot, I am one line into the extrovert lane. I'm very much an introvert. And so the thought of going into a networking event where I don't know anyone freezes me. But I have to do it. That's a big part of the work that I do. It's a big part of how I show up in the world, is being accessible, going out there, kind of meeting new people, hearing new things, bringing it back to my communities, right? So I can't afford to just opt out because it would be so much more enjoyable for me to cuddle on my couch with my Aussie Shepherd. Yes, his name is Luke Skywalker. And read a book, which is probably what I would be doing if I wasn't out networking, right? So the one thing about Maria, she tried this strategy with her son, and he's a young adult. And now instead of calling and just saying, hey, how are you? Or sort of doing that mundane checking in, she was asking him deeper questions like, hey, did you do something this week that you were proud of? Is there a challenge that's happening at work that you want to sort of toss through, right? And so that shift, these shifts that she was making beyond kind of those surface level talks into something that felt a little bit more intimate, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more measured, really, really created deeper trust and impact across many different spheres of her life, right? So here's what research tells us. And this was a long-running study that Harvard did, and it was on happiness. I'm sure you guys have seen some of that. This is the one that tracked participants over 80 years. My God, that's like 8 decades. You know what they found? They found that the quality of your relationships is the single strongest predictor of long-term well-being. A lot of times on this podcast, I talk about the fact that when we separate our career self from our personal self, there is no whole self. We are performative in some area. We are showing up differently for different facets of ourselves, and that's fine. But long term, if it's very dramatic and very drastic, it can have kind of these consequences, right? So I'll say that again, wow, I kind of lost so yeah, in this Harvard study done over the course of 80 years, the quality of your relationships is the single strongest predictor of long-term well-being. Not your bank account, not our career titles, not even how many people we know, and definitely not how many business cards we have. And I have a lot. It comes down to how deeply you connect. That's why small talk feels so unsatisfying, right? Because deep down, we are wired for connection. I don't know if you guys have watched this Netflix special called The Blue Zone. And it talks about in certain parts of the world, there are tiny little pockets where people live to be well over 100 years old. And so they did this study on what influenced that was different from the way many of us live. And I know that was also a big finding in the data that they collected out of these blue zones, is that necessity around having vital, meaningful relationships that gave you sustenance during the bad time, but also you were able to celebrate the little things and sort of enjoy life, right? So I want to talk today about kind of not only why small talk leaves us feeling empty, but what happens when we push past it. What happens when we risk sharing more about ourselves, going deeper, right? Sharing something real, because I really believe that's where magic happens. In my first, so I'm an entrepreneur. I worked full-time in corporate America and the federal government. Left that about 25 years ago. For 25 years, left that about 3 years ago to go full-time into entrepreneurship. But before that, I owned a personal styling and branding business on the side while I had my full-time corporate job. And I worked over the course of 5 years while I ran that business with hundreds of women. And I did personal styling shows. I did bigger events. I partnered with companies like Habitat, Dress for Success, Habitat for Humanity, to dress and boost women's confidence, but also to teach them how their personal brand via not only clothing, but posture and tone and all of these things created sort of a ripple effect of success and self-confidence in their life. And so one of the things that I had to get better at, and I'm not perfect at it, none of us are, is how to have meaningful conversations. Because how people look, their vulnerabilities around their body, their image, their skin, aging. I dealt with a lot of vets who were very much used to a uniform and didn't know how to come out of that. I had to understand how to build trust with them faster. And so my point here is people lean in when they think you actually care about them, not just about what they're buying or what they do. And so that really taught me the power of asking better questions and sharing more vulnerably about myself. For example, I had severe endometriosis, and I had a bunch of surgeries over the course of the past, 15 years for that. So I have a lot of surgery scars. And so that really hindered me from wearing certain things or being self-conscious about certain things. And I opened up about that. I mean, it's part of who I am, right? It's part of the landscape of my body. And so me working through my own insecurities about that really enabled them to step into that arena with me and share about their own bodies. And I'm not at all advocating for sharing about that level of personal stuff at work, but definitely find things, right? Like how Maria talked to her CFO about causes that he was passionate about that took it outside of just the data and the spreadsheet and the budget allocations. Think about ways that you can take those conversations deeper. So the first thing is meaningful conversations build trust faster. Another one is conversations build opportunities. Those of us that are, I'm still learning how to network properly, to be honest, but there are some people that network like champs. And it's not networking in their eyes. They are genuinely curious people. They are genuinely intrigued by what people do, how they show up, what they're doing later, what's their life like. And all of us love to be around those people. I'm a bit more reserved. You couldn't probably tell it from this podcast because I run my mouth here. But I really admire people that show up and are just all in to the conversation. And by virtue of their warmth, by virtue of their energetic sort of presence, it draws us in, the quieter ones, right? And so finding a way to use conversations, maybe be around people and learning from them that do this better than us, creates opportunity, right? I've also seen this over and over in my career, both at the Department of Homeland Security, even in private sector when I worked for IBM, and definitely now in my coaching practice where I get most of my business comes from referral. And I don't think that would happen if people didn't know me, if I didn't have deeper conversations with them and didn't share a little bit about myself. Even right now, some of the struggles I'm going through, being in the sandwich generation, taking care of our aging and ailing parents and also our teenagers, kind of that in-between perimenopausal space, like breaking the ice a little bit with some depth really goes a long way, right? And so if you're not into that, a strategy could be instead of saying, how was your day or what are you working on? Maybe you ask, what made you smile today? You're gonna meet some jerks that are gonna be like, oh my God, whatever. That's okay, right? We're not everybody's cup of tea, and definitely everybody's not our cup of tea. I want to share a story today, right? Like, I want to go back to this concept of how do you connect with family members, or especially if you're a parent, or if you, even if you don't have kids and you're interacting with young adults. A lot of times we are challenged because they have the phone, the screen in their face, or they get distracted very easily. And for most of us generationally, these things pose a little bit of a challenge for us. And so one of it is when I opened up to my daughter, she's 18, about tough friendships I had had, my first real heartbreak was actually a best friend kind of breaking up with me. And pressures from exams. They seem to think, which is terribly incorrect, that because they see me as a high achiever now and doing all these things, that it was always like that. I found a report card. My God, I can't believe I'm sharing this. I found a report card. So I grew up in Trinidad, as most of you know. I found a report card from high school. I went to high school on the islands. And towards the end, dudes, it was so bad. It was so bad. Like I had, I think, a D in chemistry. It was awful. And in the Caribbean, listen, it was savage. Like, let's just say there were like 34 kids in your class. They would list based on your grades, like where you fell in the ranking of the class. So you were either first out of 34 or 33rd out of 34. They did not care. They gave 0 Fs about your feelings. They told you flat out, you're 29th out of 30, right? And you had to, that was the consequence of you not doing your work. So when I showed my kids kind of where my grades were, and it was right before we had moved to America, so I knew we were coming here. I slacked off. I was kind of a little bit sad and depressed. I had a boyfriend. Like I was doing all of these things, and it was grief, and it was a little bit of rebellion because I felt like I didn't have a say in our big move. And so, but when I showed them that report card, it opened the door to so many better conversations with them, right? So for you to become an anchor for your adult children that are trying to fly the nest, opening up about things that you feel maybe sometimes makes you lesser in their eyes actually doesn't. It actually humanizes you, especially, like I said, those of us that are uber high performers and the only way they see us is that way. Show them kind of the parts of yourself that weren't always like that, right? There's another example. So I always like to give a personal example so that you can find something that relates to you, and then like a leadership example, right? So this is the one. I did work with a CEO one time. We were doing budget analyses, and he had a habit of starting every staff meeting with numbers, targets, deadlines, always metrics. And people literally would just look down and they would fidget. They would just doodle. I'm a big doodler. You can look through all my notes and see doodles. See, I just mentally doodled right there. But people were tuning out. And then one day, instead of opening with that, he said, before we get down to business, I kind of want to know what's a win you're proud of this week. And really the entire room shifted because people, one, they were hearing from each other. And the wins, he kind of encouraged the sharing of the wins to not only be work related. And so it was like tiny little things. Like somebody, I think one of their wins was like they finished wallpapering the bathroom that had been freaking peeling for like years. And so everybody laughed about that. Another one was like, oh my God, they potty trained the puppy, right? Like after 6 weeks. So people leaned in, they celebrated each other. And by the time they got to the numbers, I got to say the energy was different. There was such a shift. There was more openness, more vibes, right? And so that one question took that meeting from mechanical and mundane to sort of meaningful, right? And people felt a little bit more connected, not only to each other, but also to the work that they were doing. So that's the power, I think, of meaningful conversations and moving away from, the surface level talk. They go beyond exchanging words. They create connection, alignment, trust. And once you have trust, everything else moves forward a lot faster, a lot deeper. So let's get practical. I always like to give you little strategies, right? How, if your small talk feels empty, if you are struggling with the, oh my God, it's so sunny here in Florida. I freaking do it too. If you are, I'm going to give you 5 strategies. So whether you are at a networking event, a family dinner, or even a one-on-one with either your boss or your employees, I'm going to give you some simple things, and you can use them really today or at any point, right? You can flex these. So number one, lead with curiosity, not credentials. I think I told you there are some people that I meet that are just curious about life. They're just filled with optimism. Matter of fact, I saw another stat come across my feed just this morning that talks about the power of optimism and how it also adds longevity to your life and vitality to sort of you, right? And so most people at events open with credentials. Hi, I'm Stacey. I'm the CEO of Evolution Executive Coaching. What do you do? And we get straight to the jugular, and it throws me off sometimes. Let me reframe that. The awareness I have of how crazy that is happens when I go to different countries and nobody asks, what's your name? What do you do? It is not even tertiary in the conversation. And here we lead with that, right? Here in America. So what do you do? It's safe, but it also boxes people into their job title, right? And honestly, most of us are so much more than our LinkedIn headline, but also there's so much more to an interesting conversation from the beginning than what do you do and me just saying my title. So why does this work, right? Why does leading with curiosity and not credentials work? Well, beneath every role and every resume, there's a story. Remember I was telling you about the CFO with Maria and how he had this huge nonprofit thing that he was doing that was bringing him mad passion outside of work, right? And there was a story behind that. He was passionate about something that was deeply meaningful to him because he had some tragedy in his family. And that was his way of kind of not only processing, but giving back. So when you ask people kind of what really matters, you really are signaling that you're not here for the sort of transaction. You're here for the meaning, the deeper meaning. And that's when people sort of let their guard down. And we all know that phrase, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And so when the walls come down and when the connection shifts from transactional, that's when you get into like a true transformative relationship. There are people now that I didn't know a year and a half ago, but I met them and through coffee chats or seeing them every time. And we share about our children and we share about events coming up and we tack on how our travel went and what we loved most about it. And now these are the people that helped my kid get an internship over the summer. These are people when I was packing to move my daughter for the first time in her dorm and they had done it before. They were veterans at this. They were like, oh, forget about that. You need this, this, and this, and even sent me Amazon links. I mean, talk about improving the overall quality of your life, right? So leading with curiosity, not credentials, opens up the door for so many other things. Another strategy is asking questions that invites stories. Remember we talked about how was your day? It was fine. Instead of, was there something that you were proud of this week, right? So small talks encourage short answers. Real connections come from stories. I don't know about you, but I love a TED Talk. I love TED Talks. I love podcasts because they enable me I'm very visual, but I'm also an avid reader. And so I really love when people talk and tell these stories and I filter it through my lens of how I process information. Really love that. And so instead of how was your weekend, if somebody says, hey, what was the highlight of your weekend? Or did anything surprise you over the weekend? It forces me to pause. And in that pause, there's room for growth. In that pause, there's room for appreciation. In that pause, there's room for gratitude. And I think we forget in these short, trite, automatic answers how much room we have to really be ourselves, be a little bit more, happy. So why does this work? Stories become your hack, your shortcut, your secret weapon for the truth of what's really happening with people. They don't just tell you what someone does. They show you how they're living, what are they valuing, how are they seeing the world, right? And once you know that, you can sort of meet them where they are and not where you want them to be, but also align, right? You can find quicker the people that you align with, the people that share your core values. And that's when you start building real things. Really, really, really. I've met over the course of actually my son, Adam. So he's 15 and, using a little bit of time out for some stuff. So I took away his PS5 and I gave him the worst possible task I could, which I think I had over 200 business cards. I just kept bringing them home and putting them in a drawer. It's awful, I know. And I said to him, I cleared out the dining room table and I said to him, I want you to categorize these by industry or job. So realtors or investment bankers or coaches or, whatever. Guys, there was a mini mutiny in my house. He totally despised doing this, but it forced him to read the business card. And if it was ambiguous, we had an ambiguous pile. I should tell those people their business card doesn't actually say what they do. But anyway, I digress. But really, it forced him to kind of do that. And it forced us to have a better conversation about it, right? All right. So the other one, this is one I am working on. I come from a culture where we interrupt each other because we're so excited to add our 2 cents, and we are listening, but we are also talking. And then we are also having 4 other conversations at the same time. And I know in some cultures that is so rude to interrupt and jump in. And like I said, still working on it. But practice active listening is strategy number 3. So we've all been in conversations where somebody's waiting their turn to talk. And a lot of that stems from our own desire to be seen and feel worthy in the conversation, especially in corporate when maybe it's a presentation of data or strategies or whatever, and you just want to show the boss that, oh my God, I totally have my shit together and I know what I'm doing, right? But that's not connection. It really is performative. Instead, reflect back. After the person talks, say, hey, what I'm hearing is you're really energized by mentoring younger leaders, and wait for them to sort of acknowledge that, yes, that's what I meant. And then maybe you can chime in with your 2 or 5 or 10 cents, right? So why does this work? When people feel truly heard and not just nodded at, they relax their guard. It tells them that you value their perspective and not just their presence. And in that sense, that respect and trust is built quicker than a simple exchange of, I'm just going to wait till you speak so I can jump in with mine and so that I can prove that I'm better than you. And in leadership, right, I want to say that being heard, as someone that has been a leader, but also as an employee, when I had leaders that didn't listen, it created disengagement. You shut down because our voice didn't count. When the emperor, and that's really bad for a leader, because if the emperor does not have their crap together and nobody's telling you that, you're out there alone. Because 1, you don't want to hear what we have to say. You don't want any bad news. You just want a bunch of head nodders. And it's a death sentence for your business, especially for innovation, especially for diverse sort of voices, especially for people that have really different perspectives, but the perspective is worthwhile and worthy, right, for the work that you're doing. So practicing active listening is definitely a strategy. Another one is sharing something real about yourself. I talked just now about endometriosis really casually. I talk really openly about being in the sandwich generation. Connection is a 2-way street. Some of my best client referrals or client proposals came because people heard me speak even on this podcast, and they wanted to go deeper because I modeled it first. I was open about the thing that they were secretly struggling with. And again, have some discernment around what you share, right? I'm not saying go out there and oh my God, here's all my business, but definitely leave room for vulnerability as a leadership strategy, right? And so this is a famous one, and even I'm guilty of this still, is when people say, how are you? I know for me right now, it's a hard question for me to answer because so much is in transition. So much is shifting in my life that it's easier for me to be like, I'm fine. But I've got a few friends, man. I've got a few colleagues that are being really diligent about checking in with me each week. And I deeply appreciate it. And sometimes I'm like, just hanging on, or it's hectic. I'll give 2-word answers because just to get into it is so hard. But I'm noticing just how appreciative I am of them. And quite honestly, you guys, it's building reciprocity. Like, these are people that I will now look out for because they're in their own way looking out for me while I'm going through a tough season. And I think as leaders in the workplace, there are people that check on other people. And I don't know that we appreciate that enough, right? So a better answer than I've been busy or things are okay is maybe, honestly, I've been slowing down on work lately because it's been tough. I have some, whatever you want to insert there. And I think that opens the door for people to also share, right? Vulnerability is magnetic. And you don't need to overshare. That's not what I'm suggesting. But a small, authentic peek behind the curtain signals safety, right? It shows that you're human. And I talk a lot about the highlight reel, REEL, versus the real REAL stuff that a lot of us are grappling with right now. So when you open up just even a little bit, right, you invite others to kind of step out of autopilot and meet you in the real conversation. And I promise you that's where magic happens. This is another quick strategy: bridge questions, a secret weapon. What's a bridge question? Okay, a bridge question, for example, is someone says, hey, I've been working in finance for 10 years. Instead of nodding and moving on to what you've been working on for the past 10 years, maybe you say, wow, that's interesting. What got you in the field, that field in the first place? So it opens the door for that story. Remember I was telling you, we love stories, right? So bridging questions transforms just facts into stories. And they open the door and give you insight into what's shaped the person that you're interacting with. And that is powerful because then you understand where this person fits for you. Are you guys aligned? And I think as we get older, it's really important for us to align with people that share our core values and sort of our vibe attracts our tribe. And so it's kind of that, self-fulfilling ice cream, self-licking ice cream, self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever. All right. So these 5 shifts may feel small, but they're game changers. I'm going to go over them again. 1, lead with curiosity, not credentials. Ask questions that invite stories. Practice active listening. Share something real about yourself. Bridge questions are a secret weapon, right? So these take conversations from forgettable to memorable. They open the door for that know, like, trust factor, not only with you as the person initiating a deeper conversation, but it allows that other person to sort of show up a little bit more fully, a little bit more authentically with you, right? And they walk away being seen as that whole person. Remember, I was telling you, oh my God, here's corporate Stacey and here's personal Stacey, and I don't know where the rest of me is. But now the people that I do business and quite frankly do life with see me as a whole person and not just a business card that they're trying to figure out what category I go in. Like I had my son do on the table. And then even worse, that there was ambiguity about that, right? A couple of risks of staying in small talk. There's true consequences to that. 1, at work, you're going to miss opportunities to stand out, build influence, and be remembered. You're just going to be another cog in the wheel. In life, your relationships are going to stay on autopilot, even with people you see every day. I know sometimes we're so busy in the house, pick up, drop off, podcasting, coaching, sports, walking the dog. Like a lot of it is just routine, and we miss the moments to really just have a warm conversation. One of the things I've been doing, exploring with my son is, at first it was guilting him into walking the dog with me. There's like a 2.5 little mile trek that we try to do late afternoon because it's so hot here. But I've taken to asking him to come with me because I need the company. And man, the conversations we're having on that walk, and a lot of times it's funny stuff, but it has really, I don't know, closed that gap I was feeling that they're growing up too fast and leaving the nest, right? And I think even with clients, instead of just jumping into the business of the thing, take a breath. take a pause, right? And then long term, you're going to feel like you are truly understood, heard, seen, and you want that for the people in your sphere, right? There's this Maya Angelou saying, people will remember how you made them feel. They will forget what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And so when people feel valued and heard, we just all want to be kind of seen, right? That impression lasts. So my challenge to you this week as I wrap up, to try to go beyond small talk, to try to go beyond how is the weather, how was your weekend in one conversation. And you could do it at work, a networking event, or even around your dinner table, is ask one question that goes a little bit deeper, share one real thing about yourself, and then pay attention to the shift in energy. Pay attention to what happens when you bring that level of you to the conversation, where you move from polite to personal, from surface to substance. And that's, I think, when true conversation happens. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend, a colleague who is tired of surface level conversations. Please like and subscribe and leave me a review. That's how more people find this podcast and find these conversations. And if you're ready to go beyond small talk in your leadership, in your influence, and in your life, I invite you to follow me on social media. My website is staceyluces.com. I'm on LinkedIn at stacey.luces. And if you want to send me a note asking just for more information, happy to do that too. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week.